welcome back to Crosscraft Sundays, Lounging in PJs. And is there anything better than lounging in your PJs on a Sunday morning and relaxing and crafting? This video is called Crochet Part 3, Edgings. And before we get started, I just wanted to take a quick second to thank you so much for visiting and subscribing to this YouTube channel. It is so fun to watch the Crosscraft Sundays community grow. And also I wanted to let you know that you could ask questions, or if there's anything that is confusing to you, please don't hesitate to comment below. I'll be watching for those, and odds are someone else has that same question. So go ahead and ask, don't be shy. And we'll start a dialogue, and I'll make sure that you know what you need to be doing going forward. So happy to do that. So today we're going to work a standalone crochet edge, and also I'm going to show you how you can use crochet to enlarge a flap of a messenger bag that I knit years ago, where the flap came out just a little bit too small. And then lastly, for you quilters, I'm going to show you how to work a crocheted edging around a baby blanket. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is work a crocheted edge that is not on any sort of piece. So let's just say we have a scarf or something or whatever, and we want to put a little edge on it. The first thing that you would see is something like make a foundation chain of the required length, or you can work directly into the piece. The only issue with working directly into the piece or starting without doing a little sample first is that when you work your original chain, like let's just say our scarf edge is 7 inches. So we would work a chain that was 7 inches long. And so we'll go ahead and do that. But the problem is a lot of the times, depending on the pattern that you're using, and there are so many, you could either get shrinkage or you could get growth. And it would be a bummer if you were doing, like, let's say the edging of a blanket or something, and you experience one of those two things, and then you've done this whole thing and you had no idea it was going to grow or shrink. So we're going to work a little 7-inch sampler to see how much percent growth or shrinkage we get, and then we can do a bigger project with this trim once we have that information. The other thing, as you'll see when we do our bag, is working directly into a piece is just all fine and good, but same thing. If you work crochet on a knitting where the knitting is sort of a loose knit and the crochet is a tight knit, you're going to get kind of wavy and puckery things happening. So it's a really good idea to just make a little sample of what you're going to do and just see what's going to happen. So as luck would have it, there's my initial chain, and it's exactly 7 inches long. So let's go ahead and work this little 2-row pattern, and I'll put it here up at the top of the screen so we can work along together, and then we'll measure it after and we'll see what happens. It's always a fun little experiment. So here's my initial chain. I've got the front of the chain worked here. Let's get this ruler out of the way so you can see. What we want is a multiple of 4, which, let's say, you know, obviously is like 20, 24, 28. And then once you have that multiple of 4, you add 1 at the end. So that's what that means. If we had a chain of 28, we would actually do 29. The multiple of 4 being the 28, and then plus 1 being the 29. And that plus 1 is probably for the the end stitches. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 36, 37. And believe that or not, that is a multiple. I don't even know how I managed to do that without counting, but 37 is a multiple of 4 plus 1. Okay, so the first row of the pattern, you can see it says chain 3. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. And then it says skip 3 chains and work what's in this parenthesis in the same stitch. Now, normally I would go into the bottom of the stitch as we talked about in the first video, but because we're going to be putting so much stuff into one chain, what happens is this gets really crowded and you might miss, this next chain sort of gets sucked up into the other one, and it's really difficult to count. So this time, because we're working fans right into the base of the chain, I'm actually going to work into the back loops, the back of the bumps. So I've chained my 3, skipped my 3, so skip 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to work into this 4th. Well, let's look it around. So we're going to skip 1, 2, 3rd bump, and in this 4th bump here is where I'm going to work that double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochets in that same stitch. And again, you know, the beginning row of crochet is just a little hard to get into, but after that it becomes smooth sailing. So we've worked our double, chain 1, and then 2 doubles, and then remember that's right into that same little bump. Alright, so once you have that done, you've got this. So then it says skip 3, and this is, remember that at the asterisk, so this is where the pattern starts. Skip 3, 1, 2, 3, and then work 2 double crochets. Get in there. Chain 1, 2 double crochets in the next stitch. So there's 1, 2, chain 1, and then we're still working in that same stitch. 1 and 2. And then it says repeat from the star to the end of the row. And so we're skipping 1, 2, 3. Working our 2 doubles, chain 1, 2 doubles into that next bump. Remember, we're working at the back of that initial chain this time. Right, so let's take this hook out and get this yarn out of the way we can see what's going on here. So we have our initial chain, and so here's the back of it. Looks really pretty. And we've still got both pieces of the chain intact. All right, we have our, remember in the beginning we worked 1 double, chain 1, 2 doubles because that chain 3 helped us get into that. And then we skipped 3 and we went in and did our fan. Skipped 3, went in and did our fan. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of that all along the row, and then let's measure it and see what it looks like. Alrighty. So here is our row 1 done and measured. Where you want to measure though, careful on this, you don't want to measure from here because that's not the part that you're going to be sewing onto your piece. You'll be sewing the base of the first fan first. So measure from that. This is just extra. Okay, so what we're doing is we're measuring the base, not so much fan to fan. We stretch this out, it still looks like we're going to be able to maintain that 7 inches so far. Now, this little edging just has 1 more row, and it's very similar. The only difference is that we're going to work chain 3 in between those. So let me show you what that looks like. Let's take this ruler out of the way. And then here's row 2, which starts by saying chain 3, 1, 2, 3. And then in parentheses, it's 1 double crochet, chain 3, 2 double crochets in the same space. So we're just building fans on top of fans, and that's pretty typical. You'll see that a lot. All right, so that's what that looks like. The pattern repeat then will be 2 double crochets, chain 3, 2 double crochets in each chain 1 space. Okay, that looks great. What you're going to do is work that all the way across the row, and then we'll measure it and see what it looks like. Our row is done, and as you can see, we have grown an inch, so that is really useful information. by the time we got this second row done, you know, from where we would attach this to whatever it is that we're going to attach this to, we have gotten an inch. So for purposes of measuring and knowing how many to chain on, we know we have our multiple of 4 plus that one at the end. But for every 7 inches of our piece, we are going to grow 1 inch. And this is the ultimate true measurement you want to consider because this is a finished piece. Always best to take 5-10 minutes and rock out a little sample before you measure 60 inches of something and you do this whole thing and all of a sudden you have way too much or way too little. There's nothing worse than that. So anyway, so then what we would do is we would just cut our tail here, pull it through, and then weave in our ends like you saw in the second video, or leave a really long tail and use this to stitch it to your piece. Now, if your piece is fabric or cloth, I think that it would be best to sew this on with sewing thread rather than yarn. But if your piece is knitted, you certainly could use the yarn to sew this on. Okay, so clearly, as you can see by these pictures, this is a great bag I knit. I think it came from, Interweave Knits maybe. I think it's been literally like 10 years since I've knit this bag. And it's just been sitting there waiting for a lining. But not only that, the flap is just so weird. It's so small. So what I did was I lined the bag, as you can see here, with this great little Amy Butler print, and then flapped over. This is what I'm going for. This is the area that I need to cover with crochet. So the back of the flap has, and whenever I line a purse, I always use fusible fleece. I fuse that to one of the purse linings just to give it some extra structure and stability. So that's the white that you see here. Now, crochet can be kind of holey, so I think what I'll end up probably doing is putting another piece of fabric on the white so that the white doesn't shine through. And I do that for all my linings and all my bags. I always make 2 linings, put one inside the other. That way, if there's anything that comes through on the knit or the crochet, you don't see that white lining. I'm going to start at the flap, and then once this is extended, I'm just going to go ahead and stitch it to that. That way the flap will be attached to either side of the bag, and that's just a no-brainer. It's much easier to do. So now, as far as where to insert my hook, that does not really matter so much, but what does matter is that when you find the place, you stay consistent. So I put my hook into 2 threads of a stitch, and I'm going to slip stitch to join. All right, so I'm joined in there, and chain 1, and then I'm just going to work some single crochets. So I've gone into that. I'm just going to keep going to sort of where it's obvious to go into, and keep the line the same, and that's sort of the secret. So there's 1. I'm going to go ahead and go into the knit. 2. 3. Go into the knit. Now I have gone into the purl, the knit, the purl, the knit. And if you don't know knitting, that's okay. So you can, it's obvious, you know, I've gone into the sort of the bumps, the smooth, the bumps, the smooth. In my experience, if I go into every single stitch, the crochet is going to be too tight, and it's going to, again, make some wobbly things happen, and I can't stand that. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try this first, and then I'm going to work this, and then I'll come back and I'll let you know if it's going to be wobbly. Now that may not be the right decision, but we don't know that until we at least make one decision. So it's just worth going in. It doesn't ruin a thing if it's not the right one and you have to take it out and redo. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to ruin anything. It just costs a couple minutes of your time. Now, when you hit a corner, you have got to do more crochets in the corner before you come back around. Otherwise, you'll stretch this and it'll just look funky. You've got to give yourself some more real estate to work into. So this to me seems like the corner, even though it's a rounded corner. What I'm going to do here is 3 single crochets into this corner here. That way when I come around, it won't pull or anything. I can just go ahead and finish out the round. So there's my skip. Okay, so I finished that row all the way back up to the other side of the flap. And here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to do the second row. I'm going to come back around and work single crochets. And in this time, I'm going to work in every single one. Kind of go on this little journey together. And that way you can kind of see, I know it's not hands-on because I'm doing something that's really specific, but at least you can kind of see what you have to maybe go through when you decide that you want to add crochet to a piece that you already have. So with that, I will start and do round 2, putting the increases just on this side. So here's what it looks like after 2 rows of single crochet. It's a little wobbly. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but definitely there are places where, like right here, it wants to stick up. Now this is wool, so I could steam this out into submission. I really could. But when you get that kind of puckering and wobbly, that means I have too many crochet stitches. And we learned from the crochet trim that I did that it's only going to get wider because remember, we gained an inch. Okay, so I took everything out that I had done. I knew it was just going to get continually wavier as I went on. So what I did instead was I joined the yarn and I worked a single crochet in each of these smooth ones with a chain one in between, and I like it so much better. It just seemed to go really smooth and it lays perfectly flat. So then on the second row, I turned around and I did the exact same thing where I single crocheted into the single crochets and I chained one in between. Now I'm set up to do the little pattern that we worked on that separate strand of crochet trim, working in the chain one spaces. So that pattern was, let's just go ahead and work it right into the piece, and that way you can see what that's going to look like. And it was chain 3 and then double crochet into the space. And I'm just going to do the beginning row, which is the chain 1 and then 2 double crochets in that same space. Oops, I split the yarn a little bit, but that's okay. And then my next would be skip 3 stitches, which is skipping the single crochet, the chain space, the single crochet, and I'm going to work that next pattern repeat into that space there. So it's 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, all in that same chain space. Okay, so I'm down to my corner, and I do like the way that that looks, so I'm going to keep going. And here are the 3 single crochets that I've got coming out of that corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work in that middle one right here. Here, I'll just go ahead and do it. Just because we always want a little bit more in that corner. Let's see which one it is, this middle one here. I'm going to work 3 double crochets. Chain 1, 3 double crochets. Just so we can comfortably round that corner without pulling it. You know, and a lot of this, when you're working a crocheted pattern without a pattern, it's a lot of guesswork. But that's okay. Guesswork is how you learn, so it is all good. And then moving on, skipping and finding the next chain space, which is this one. And then going back to the 2 doubles, chain 1, 2 doubles. Okay, another decision making time. So I really like the way it looks, but I know going in from our sample that we did that if I do this row again coming back, I'm going to get serious wave, because remember, for every 7 inches it's going to grow an inch. And already, even though it's laying relatively flat, and I know I can sew this right to the back, or excuse me, I can sew this to the lining and make it lay perfectly flat. And if I have to rip out again, it's crochet, so it's not a big deal. Now with knitting, you can't just, you know, double make hair, rip this all out, because you could lose an entire piece. You know, the stitches in knitting will unravel all the way down, but in crochet, all of these are secure. So if I have to take out, you know, a few things that I did, everything that I did before is preserved. I'm chaining 3, and I'm going to work that 1 double, because remember that chain 3 kind of counts as our first double. Chain 1 and then 2 more doubles into this space. Then on the next shell, rather than work that and pack even more stitches into this thing, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, and that kind of lets us get a little bit closer here so that we're not actually pulling these stitches back in. So 2 doubles, oops, chain 1, 2 doubles, and then I'm going to just put a single crochet in here, but before we do that, remember, we're going to give us a little bit more room. Chain 1, single crochet, chain 1. Okay, so that was definitely the right call. I don't have nearly as many stitches packed into here, so it's laying really flat, and it looks kind of cool. You know, now I'm getting a wavy edge that I really like, and I don't know what I'm going to do on the next round, but we will figure that out as we go. Okay, so here I'm at the corner. So on either side of the corner, I'm going to ground this fan. Maybe in the first double crochet. So I'm actually going into a stitch this time. Or, you know, mostly we've been going into the chain spaces, but I'm going to go into a stitch and then chain 1. And now I'm set up to work a fan in here. And because I've done this chain 1 and I've grounded my stitch and I've added that and this chain 1, why don't we go ahead, let's see, you know, I think I am going to work the 3, because we are eliminating quite a few stitches going across the row. So I'm going to work 3 in a chain 1, 3 more, chain 1, and then I'm going to do a single crochet into the third double crochet of that last round, just so that the corner now is a mirror image. Okay, so here is that row completed, and I love, love, love it. I think it is really cool. It's lacy enough, but it's laying flat, and I'm really happy about that. So I've been searching and searching for these yarns, and I don't have them. If you saw my stash of yarn, you would be in shock that I don't have them. I am personally in shock. But that's okay, because we are using what we have and moving forward. And so I found this great little tweed that's got the reds from the flowers and some of the browns, so that might even be better. This is a great instance in where I couldn't find what I was looking for, but I think what I found is going to be even better. So I am happy. I'm taking that Bob Ross attitude of happy accidents. Make sure that when you insert your hook, your yarn is behind the hook here. If I were to go and put this back up and this yarn was in the front, I am going to have some funk right here. So always when you're working crochet, it's always behind you. So make sure it's behind you when you start a row. And I think stitch to join, and I don't really care about the whole color changing thing. This is all getting sewn into here, so it's not like it's a standalone piece where you know, any sort of weirdness that happens, I'm totally good with it. It's, you know, a wool bag and I'm sewing it in. You have to pick your battles and not be too cuckoo. So I've chained one. I'm going to just give it some strength here at the end and give a little single crochet. Then to get from here to here, let's chain 5 and see what happens. 1, 2, 3. And I can feel that this yarn is just a little bit thicker, and that's okay, but I have to make sure I'm not doing as many stitches or it's going to get really wavy. So there's my 5 chain, and I think at the top of this, I think I'm just going to work 3 single crochets. And I always like to work in an odd number on the tops of these shells, because if I decide that I want to do something later on top of here, I've got a middle one to go into. So that's what I'm going to do all the way around. I'm going to bridge all the gaps with the chain 5 and 3 single crochets at the top of each fan. So I love this. As you can see, we are almost big enough now to go ahead and sew it to the lining. That last row that I did, I really love. It edges it out, but it's a little boring. And so my idea is that I'm going to go ahead and work shells into the spaces. All right, so in order to get over to those spaces, what we want to do is just slip stitch. I'm going to chain 1 just so I'm more comfortable. Slip stitch in the single crochets. So anytime you reach a single crochet, you're just going to work across them with a simple slip stitch. Do you remember that? It's no yarn over anything. You just go directly into the stitch, bring this forward and this through. Now I'm right here at the base of this space where I can do something really fun. All right, so let's graduate these up here. We're going to go 1 single, 1 half double, 1 double, 1 treble, remember, is wrap twice, and pull through 2 stitches 3 times. And remember, since we're working in the chain space, we can just scooch those over. And then mirror it back down. So we've got a double, a half double, a single. And then we would slip stitch across those 3 single crochets of the previous round. Slip stitch and slip stitch. I think that looks pretty cool. That's the wrong side, and then this is the right side where the bump is more prominent, which I kind of like here. So I'm going to work that, and I think that that will be our last row of this bag, because we will be extended past the lining. Here is a picture of what it looks like with our crochet, and it's lined, and I've sewed the bag flap to its lining, and it is perfect, and I love it. And I've used up some old yarn, and I have renewed an old project that has just been sitting in my studio for years and years. And thanks for sticking with me. I hope that's helpful to you. It's good to know that just go ahead and play. You don't have to be any kind of expert to try to do this. As long as you know the stitches, it is a playground. So just dive in and attach your hook and some yarn and play and have some fun with a knitted piece. So this is a baby blanket that I made just specifically for this demonstration, with this adorable Boogie Monster fabric that I had when I had my store. And here's a full-size picture of it before our crocheted edging, and it's cute. I mean, you know, it's one of those things where the monsters are so cheerful and happy, and I think any little kid would kind of love it. So with the rest of the fabric that I had, I made kits, and they are available for sale on my Etsy store. There's a few girl kits, which are the pink and yellow monster fabrics, and then the boy kits will be done with the green and the blue monster fabrics. And then what you see here is sort of a combination of all the different fabrics. It's sort of a unisex little blankie, but this is going to be a great little project to show you how I would do a crocheted edging. So the first thing that you would need is a ball of yarn. This is Cotton Classic. It's a mercerized cotton, so it washes up really well, and I'm going to use that with an F hook. I've got some just craft pearl cotton size 5 that you could get at any craft shop or whatever. And this is what we're going to use first to work a blanket stitch around this edge so that we have something to put our hook into, because obviously we're not going to pierce the fabric with a crochet hook. Again, thread your needle. Get that one out of the way. So I'm going to start at the corner here, and we're going to weave this end in before we even get started and lock it into place so that we don't need knots. And all I'm doing here is just pulling up the fabric so that it's more of a corner. But you're gonna, wherever you want the thread to come out, where you're gonna start is insert the needle into it. And you see what I'm doing? I'm just running the needle along the seam. So then I'm just pulling it out maybe 1.5 inches away, and pull it just until the end of it disappears. And then what you're going to do is go right back in on itself in the same hole, if you can. You know, if you take a little bite of something, of the fabric there, and it's not in the exact same hole, that's okay. A little bit of pink right there won't even matter because we're going to cover that up anyways. So then come back out, try to pierce the thread that you're using, and that way it'll stay tight and locked up in there. And again, the needle size is big enough for the eye to hold the yarn and small and sharp enough for it to pierce the fabric and not make big holes. Alright, so then give it a little tug, and that's good and locked in. And it's important to lock them in because we're going to be crocheting out of these. So when you crochet into them, you want to make sure that they're not going to pull out. All you're going to do is, for the blanket stitch on here, is you're going to lay this parallel to the edge of your blanket. You're going to insert the needle into the seam, go all the way through to the back, and then pull your needle out over the thread that you're using. And that will allow you to travel down the blanket. I try to just pull it so that that's up on the top. Okay, and I went a little farther away. Normally I like to go every 1/4 of an inch, and here you can see I'm at 1 inch. So I'll just, when I come back around, I'll just work a stitch in there. That's not a big deal. Alright, so again, it's in about 1/4 of an inch away. And see, I'm all the way through on the other side here. Pretty simple stuff. So your next question, I'm sure, would be, what do you do when you run out of thread? Because clearly a yard of thread is not going to go around this blanket. These are 40-inch quilts, and which makes it a really nice size for even a play mat for a little baby, you know, when you want to just set them down. And it's a cushy little quilt, and all I did to quilt it was I just ditched the seam lines. I didn't do any sort of fancy quilting because I wanted the quilt to stay kind of snuggly and sweet. What we're going to do is pop that guy in, just over the parallel thread and into the fabric. And then go, you know, 1.5 inches or so, and come out just behind another parallel thread, just so that all of this kind of stays hidden. Okay, pull enough so that your last stitch lies parallel with the others. And then again, same thing that we did in the beginning, is we're going to try to get into close to that same stitch and pull it back out again. And then just give that last stitch a little tug, make sure that's in there real good, and then we can clip this. So what I want to do now to move forward is, had I not run out of yarn, my needle would be coming out of here ready to do that next stitch. So that's our goal. So I'm going to just insert the needle. Remember, we insert the needle into the spot where the yarn or thread is going to start, right? So pulling it until this just barely disappears into the fabric. Okay, I'm using my left hand to do this, so I'm a little spastic, forgive. All right, back into the hole. Try to find that little yarn and pierce it, remember, so we can really keep it locked in. And then make sure your needle is coming out just to the right of that last bar that you did, the last vertical bar, so that when we are going to move forward, it'll look like we never ran out of yarn at all. Give it a little tug, make sure it's in there tight, and then just continue on. And incidentally, I don't think I mentioned, I did a top stitch here around the whole piece, maybe 5/8 of an inch away. And I'm using that as a guide to end my vertical bars, you know, so that they all sort of look the same. So I'm trying not to pierce those top threads. I don't want to weaken them. So the corner is kind of the same. You're basically now going to just insert your needle into that corner, and then this bar will sort of come out at an angle. Oop. Make sure you remember, if this happens, that just, all that means is, I'm glad this happened actually, all that means is that you forgot to put your needle over the working thread. And so, you know, if you're about to lose the thread into the piece, just pop that up through and you'll be good to go. Now, if I were to just cruise the corner and work this next piece, this has a tendency to want to lean towards its neighbor. So to lock it in, all I do is I come in here, and I totally made this up. This is probably not even proper, but that's okay. It works for me, so I'm going to show it to you. So I just go in and I just sort of lock the horizontal bar. When I say the horizontal bar, I mean the one that's running parallel to the edge of the blanket. And if you can kind of see what I'm doing, I'm just locking it into place. And that way I'm still coming out, exiting out to the right of that stitch. No one ever knows I made that little knot there. And then I can continue on, and I know that diagonal bar is locked right into place. All right, so fast track, 45 minutes later. Incidentally, this is the last of what I had on those 2 skeins of pearl cotton. So you will definitely need 2 skeins to be able to finish this out. Now normally I would just end it here, you know, do my little corner trick. Again, that's just basically going over that horizontal bar and still coming out of the right side of that. But as I said before, this was a little farther away than I wanted, so there we go. And then to end this off, same concept as changing the yarns. You're gonna insert the needle on the other side of that horizontal bar, locking that in place. And then weaving it back in on itself to really get it in there. To crochet, we need to start a base row. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can go about this. I'm of the belief that it's best to do at least 1 stitch in each of these, so that you're not doing 1 and then chaining and maybe skipping 1 or 2 and coming over here, because it'll weaken these threads. So what you want to do is maybe do 1 single crochet, a chain 1, go into the next one, a single crochet, a chain 1, and that gets an appropriate amount of spacing to be able to crochet across the row without the yarn, the white crochet yarn, pulling on these stitches and making it appear to be bunched up. One side of the corner, go ahead and do your single crochet. Then obviously we have to chain more than one here, or we're not going to comfortably be able to round the corner. So what we're going to do is just chain 3 and then go right back into the next one, chain 1, and then continue along your side. So we're nearing the end, and we've got that corner space. We entered into that first corner space. So we're going to end by doing a single crochet and then chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then slip stitching into that first single crochet of the previous row. Pull the tail so it's tight. And now we're going to make some loops across this next row. So start by chaining 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip 3. We're going to skip a single crochet, a chain space, a single crochet, and then we're going to go into the chain 1 space. So we're skipping 3, 1, 2, 3, and going into this 4th. So it's in between those 2 single crochets. We're really, just for ease of visualizing it, you're just skipping over 2 single crochets basically and going into the chain space just after. Oh, but remember to chain 5 first. 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just visually skip that single, and go into the chain space. It's much easier than trying to count the tops of the stitches. 5, and then go into the space. This is that big chain 3 corner space. And then chain an additional 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And go into that same space. So we sort of have this little corner loopy guy. All right, and then from here, chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip our 2 singles and go into that chain space there. All right, so here I have put my last single crochet into the corner. And so to finish this out, you want to go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then work a single crochet right back into that same corner space. And then always what you want to do is join with a slip stitch back into the first stitch of the round, which is that single crochet. So I'm going to work another round of these shells on top of the other ones. And I want to start at the top of the shell. So what I'm going to do is slip stitch into the first 3 chains just to get myself up to the top of that loop. And that's a great way to travel up to the top to start the next row. Single crochet into the top stitch of the previous chain 5 loop. And the only reason I'm going to do that and mix it up this time is because if I go into the chain space, that little single crochet could slide around. And if I go into the stitch, this would be the 3rd stitch, so 1, 2, 3, it will stay in the center, which is what I want it to do this time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 1, 2, 3, go ahead and just work a single crochet in the stitch this time, not the chain space. Just mix it up a little bit. See, that way then it'll be centered which I think will look good. Let's see if we get the dark background here for you. And this is what you would do in every corner, just so you have a visual. Chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to insert the hook in that same chain space to work another single crochet. So we have that corner loop, and then to finish it, it's chain 5, 3, 4, 5, and then slip stitch in that first single crochet, which is the base of the next chain. And now I want the next row to start at the base of this. And my thinking is I want it to look sort of ruffly. So this will be our last row, and we're going to add what's called picots in these chain spaces. Pattern repeat, it's single crochet, chain 3, 3 times into the next chain space. 1, 2, 3, single crochet, 1, 2, 3, single crochet, and then rather than just go jump into this, what I want to do is sort of bridge this gap. So we're going to single crochet 2 together, the first stitch being in the current chain, the next stitch being in the next chain, and stitch them together. Right, so that gives us kind of a little ruffle on each of these. All right, so we'll work that again, and that's the repeat basically across the entire row, including, and then here's how you would work a corner. Single crochets together, single crochet, chain 1, 2, 3, single crochet, chain 1, 2, 3, single crochet, chain 1, 2, 3, single crochet, and then in our very last loop, just finish it out. And then we're just going to work a slip stitch right into that last one, and we are finished. Just pop the ball through, cut that, and you're done. And that gives such a sweet little edging to an already adorable little monster quilt. And so again, I'm going to make quilt kits with the rest of the monster fabric that I have off the bolts that I had in my store, and each kit will come with 2 balls of this white yarn. And incidentally, if you're doing this at home and you have fabric and you want to try this, for this 40-inch quilt I used about 210 yards of yarn, and that is with an F hook, and spacing these about somewhere between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch apart. So that wraps up this week's tutorial on part 3 crochet. Next week we're going to work some Oya, which is Turkish edging. That is crocheting with a very small steel hook, pearl cotton, and beads. And also I will show you how to make a crocheted bouillon. Those are kind of tricky, so I'll do a tutorial on that. But thank you again so much for joining me on Crosscraft Sundays, Crochet Part 3, Edgings. Have a wonderful day.